imminently.
Starting the recording. Ready? Okay. Let's call this.
Welcome to the audio conferencing center. Please enter a conference ID followed by pound.
Okay, please join me in the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America. And
To continue in English, press 1. Para español, presione 2.
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the audio conferencing center. Please enter a conference ID followed by pound.
Okay. So, do we have comments from the member of the audience?
I have a comment, if I may.
If you're the meeting organizer, press star now.
Thank you. Jesse Garner, the Montgomery Estates Cold Creek Trail Committee.
You're now joining the meeting.
Thank you. Continues to appreciate the cooperation and partnership.
Please wait for the leader to admit you to the meeting. Thank you for your patience.
My fault. There are 3 lots that are affecting our neighborhood as in a critical risk assessment. They are the water tower lot at the top, a small parcel within the 32-acre city-owned parcel of the creek, and then the filtration building. And you're doing a great job partnering with us, fire risk staff. City, not so much. So I've got to work on them a little bit. But again, I hope you never get tired of me saying thank you, because I call and you respond immediately. Chris is wonderful. John is my neighbor, so he has vested interest as well. We are continuing the 6 weeks between now and the first weekend in August to get everybody defensively spaced. We have 95% complete. I had just 13 lots that are problematic, so I'm going to work on those between now and the 6th. Lastly, I circulated the color chart to you. The National Fire Protection Association is celebrating 100 years this year. Firewise, which is the name of the neighborhood active part, is only 20 years old. But they run a theme each year. The theme this year is Fire Won't Wait, Plan Your Escape. I tell my neighbors, don't worry about fire, worry about earthquake. Because if the Echo Summit falls down, and the tsunami comes to Glenbrook, and the crowd needs to leave all at once, it's going to be worse than last time. So, to mark the October 9th Fire Prevention Day, I'm working with Denny's to offer free pancakes to 10 and under, and coupons to the adults that bring them to the Denny's on my Tahoe board, Sunday, October 9th. And that'll get some advertisement later. Again, thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to say hello. Thanks, Jesse.
Okay. Do we have any corrections to the agenda or consent calendar?
Move approval of the consent agenda.
I'll second that. We have a motion and a second. And that motion passes unanimously. Okay, that brings us to our presentation. Yes.
We're good to go. Have a little introduction for Eric today.
Can Eric hear us?
Good.
Okay, perfect. We can't hear him now.
Hi, everybody. Sorry, I was muted. I can hear you loud and clear.
Perfect.
Great, thanks, Eric. So Eric and David have been advocates for the district since the 1990s, when the district first engaged in its resources to help resolve the MTBE crisis. has helped ensure that our issues were included in federal policy to protect public agencies from unintended liability for groundwater cleanups. After our work with ENS, the district succeeded in securing funding for MTBE resurgence planning. We're making sure utility relocation costs are included as part of the EIP project implementation, such as erosion control and curb and gutter projects. and for helping secure over $10 million in federal funding for improvements to our water and sewer pipeline systems. With our work with ENS, the district has been able to resolve a number of regulatory disputes and delays with federal agencies related to the management of waste sites, PURVEYOR wetlands, and other matters, resulting in significant cost savings to our ratepayers. And I would add a significant reduction in headaches for district engineers, hydrogeologists, and others. And in regards to our recent efforts on water infrastructure for fire suppression, ENS has helped the district lead a regional coalition to communicate wildfire risk and the idea of shared responsibilities at the state and federal level in order to obtain funding assistance for water infrastructure. The latest example of this is the $7 million in funding projected to come in this year to the district and partner agencies as part of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. Since we have established our partnership with ENS Resources, the district, and most importantly our ratepayers, have seen the value of this collaboration translated into many millions of dollars in benefits. So Eric, after positions at the US EPA and Washington-based consulting firms, Eric Saperstein founded ENS Resources in 1986. Eric is here today to provide us with some updates and strategic insights on federal, legislative, and regulatory activities relevant to the district. Thanks for joining us, Eric.
Well, thank you, John, and good afternoon, everybody. And if for some reason the microphone doesn't work well or something, let me know and I'll move closer. First of all, let me thank you all for the opportunity to be here and present to you. I wish it was in person. However, if everybody has time, I will be in Lake Tahoe region for the CASA August meeting. So I'll be there. I'll be happy to meet face-to-face with anybody and answer any questions or what have you. It's been a while since we had the chance to come before you due to the pandemic. And I do want to say up front that David French would have been here on the presentation, but he had a previously scheduled commitment with his daughter who's getting out of college for the year and had to go down and pick her up. So anything that I say that you find offensive, you can say it's David's fault, not mine. Okay. With that, John, I think, right, I could just go to the presentation mode and start the formal presentation. Let's see if that works. Can you see the slides?
Not yet.
Not yet?
Are you sharing your screen, Eric?
So, it said I was a presenter. Let me see. Let me double check here. Oh, I'm sorry. What it said was, okay, let's see. All right. Bear with me. Let's see if this works. Can you see my screen now?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, excellent. So let me, okay, here we go. Okay, so what I want to do today is quickly go through in the next several minutes some of the issues that are of importance, as the general manager mentioned, to South Tahoe Public Utility District. And then I'm more than open to answering any questions if time permits. What I want to say up front, the issues that we're going to look at, Wildfire Suppression and Lake Tahoe Restoration Act, that is in capitalizations, that is not a mistake. That is probably one of the biggest success stories going back many years and today, as the general manager mentioned about the regional effort. Then I want to talk about PFAS liability, water infrastructure assistance through the infrastructure law and beyond that, drought relief for the western states, but more importantly, a huge focus on California. And then I just want to touch briefly on fiscal year 23 appropriations because of what that may hold for the fire partnership. Okay, first of all, I want to give the general manager credit for the Tahoe Water Infrastructure Fire Suppression Coalition. This was something that we worked with John on to see about the value of sort of formalizing a coalition of interests. That would be Tahoe City and North Tahoe utilities to work together on a more formal basis to push for funding for fire suppression. And I think John gets a huge hat tip for pushing this because it's been very, very successful. Generally speaking, just as background, over the past several years, South Tahoe has received almost $10 million in directed federal funding to support wildfire response efforts, including upgrading your facilities and infrastructure to better respond. While you had a devastating fire last year, the investments that were made possible by the foresighted efforts to rebuild the infrastructure on a regional basis helped to mitigate some of those damages. In the budget year that we're in now, that was successfully concluded back in early part of 22, FY22 funding, there's a commitment of $7 million for water infrastructure for fire suppression needs that could come to the Tahoe region. That is being dealt with right now from an agency standpoint to get the money out there to you folks. We'll see what they end up doing. David did mention to me at one point that that funding could increase to $16 million or more based on what the agency, U.S. Forest Service, does with respect to how much money they commit to fire suppression in the region. But that's all good, and this is all a direct result of the coalition efforts that were launched. Overall, in the Restoration Act, that $23.8 million for funding in Tahoe, that breaks out into water infrastructure, as I mentioned, fire suppression, forest management activities, stormwater control, erosion control, and watershed management issues, all through the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act. I think what I would leave you with on this issue is that this was made possible also, obviously, by the Lake Tahoe Congressional Delegation. I want to state that Senators Cortez Masto and Representative Amade, Rosen, Feinstein, and Padillo all came out strongly in support of this effort. And Representative McClintock has a position of not supporting earmarks. He has been actively supportive of the general efforts to bring more resources into the Tahoe Basin to fight the fire issues. So what's really nice, even though we have what is obvious on day-to-day division in Washington between the parties, when it comes to your issues, it's bipartisan, and it's strongly bipartisan. So it's all encouraging activities when it comes to fire suppression assistance in general, water infrastructure assistance overall, and I'll get to that in a second. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about PFAS liabilities and standard setting. This is a big issue. You probably have read about it. From a drinking water standard, I would assume that Tahoe's water is so pristine that you really don't have a serious PFAS in drinking water issue. However, what I want to leave you with today is that there is House legislation known as the PFAS Action Act of 2022, H.R. 2467, and among the provisions, and it's passed the House, among the provisions in that bill is a mandate to designate PFAS chemicals as hazardous substance under Superfund, the nation's hazardous waste cleanup law. The reason that's important, if that were to pass and be enacted into law, that would theoretically put water agencies in the sort of crosshairs of liability litigation by producers of and manufacturers of PFAS. Now, you may say, well, you already told us we don't really have to worry about it because it's not in drinking water. The problem is that there have been enough scientific studies and research that suggest biosolids contain PFAS chemicals simply because these chemicals are ubiquitous. They're in your food wrappers, they're in your recreational gear, like the Patagonia type polyethylene or whatever jackets and things. It's in furniture, stain protection. It's all over the chain of commerce, and that gets transferred into the wastewater process and then concentrated We don't know how serious that concentration effort is, but it's in the biosolids. And so if this were to be these chemicals were to be designated, there would be a potential, I emphasize the word potential, liability under Superfund for the biosolids. And at a best case or worst case scenario, it would mean that you could see increased costs of disposal, both from a management standpoint and also from a post-closure of a site monitoring. So that's where we are from a sort of overall perspective. The good news is, number one, the Senate Committee on Environment and Public Works currently has H.R. 2467 before it. And generally speaking, there is not enough votes in the United States Senate to include such a designation mandate. So we are saying the outlook for legislation this year is highly unclear. We're optimistic that it will not pass into law, or be passed out of Congress and then sent to the President's desk for enactment. But nonetheless, we are working closely and actively with a number of stakeholders, including AQUA, CASA, AWWA, the American Water Works Association, on a unified position to seek an exemption from any liability for the water sector if, in fact, Congress were to move forward on implementing or designating hazardous substance status for PFAS under Superfund. We're optimistic, though, that at the end of the day, legislatively, that won't be an issue. What I do want to say, though, is the agency, EPA, has released, as of January of this year, what we call the PFAS roadmap. And that roadmap is a series of priorities and calendar events to do a number of these issues that are on this chart. Creating a maximum contaminant level with required monitoring for drinking water. The state of California currently has a response level, and I would imagine that that would be the standard ultimately that EPA would probably end up on. We know there are rumors that EPA might come up with a much more stringent standard than what California's is, but we're hopeful at the end of the day that it won't be any worse or stringent than what California's is. And that's not because we don't want to protect drinking water supplies. It's just that the science remains to be proven that we need to have such standards that are almost close to zero presence of these chemicals for treatment. I mentioned earlier the legislative effort to designate hazardous substance of PFAS under Superfund. EPA currently is moving forward on a regulatory basis to do just that. It is pending, the rulemaking is pending at the Office of Management and Budget. The agency wants to get a final rule proposed by the end of calendar year 2023. I guess the one thing I would leave you with is, number one, we are working with the Congress to see if we can get some kind of provision that would tell EPA they have to exempt the water sector from any kind of designation impacts. We have to have a congressional effort because EPA does not have the authority to designate exemptions under Superfund for sectors or for individual actors other than what's spelled out in the law, like acts of God and what have you, for liability under Superfund. So we are hopeful that that won't ultimately come to pass, but if EPA does issue the rule, we fully expect litigation to basically blast off as soon as that hits the street, primarily because it is statutorily unclear whether the agency has the authority to do such a substance designation. One of the things that looks like we're looking to see coming out shortly is new science on the toxicity associated with PFAS in biosolids. We've had a number of states impose new standards on biosolids with respect to PFAS. Most notably in the state of Maine, they banned all use of biosolids in the state of Maine. This seems to be gathering more and more momentum across the nation. We expect that EPA, based on our latest information, the EPA's science is going to suggest that the toxicity associated with biosolids that have PFAS is greater than they thought. So we assume that going forward in the next several months, they will probably issue new treatment requirements associated with biosolids under the Section 503 regulations of the Clean Water Act for biosolids management and disposal. And then finally, just yesterday, EPA issued a health advisory to drinking water agencies and states on PFAS. This is more about advising you that you will probably see a lot of press about the threat from PFAS based on the health advisories that the agency has released. These health advisories are released in order to provide agencies and states with technical information on the health threats to communities from chemicals that are currently not regulated under a drinking water standard. They are not used for enforcement purposes, but I think the message I want to leave with you is that don't be surprised if you get a lot of questions about what kind of threats do we have with our drinking water supply in Tahoe. And as I noted before, given our conversations with your staff in the past, it doesn't sound like you really have a PFAS presence in your drinking water just because of your pristine sources of water. But I just want to point that out because it's going to, it is on the street today, and the state of California will probably look at that as a way to either justify revisions to their current response levels or just a justification to keep them where they are right now. And then finally, good news is there is funding on the wastewater side to assist wastewater agencies to implement source control problems to remove PFAS from the wastewater flow, or the effluent entering your system. And this has become sort of the rallying call for the sector at large because we do believe that the best way and the most cost-effective way to deal with PFAS is to go to the source of the chemicals, which is basically your discharging entities that are identified as contributing to the challenges, to work with them to get them removed from the waste stream before they discharge into your system. Okay, let's turn to some good news. Water infrastructure assistance and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act that was enacted into law. This was the bipartisan agreement several months ago. It's now known as the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. I just continue to call it IIJA. Best news here is historic level of funding. $60 billion over 5 years for the State Revolving Loan Fund program, combined drinking water and wastewater. For California, it translates into approximately $900 million annually. I say approximately because it bumps up a little bit every year the way they structured the $60 billion. To give you a comparison, California has received on average in recent years for the State Revolving Loan Fund program approximately $90 to $100 million. So this is a huge amount of money that's going to come to the state for the State Revolving Loan Fund program. And keep in mind, this funding can support any number of needs from stormwater to basic drinking water system upgrades. We are working to clarify that it clearly could help in the on the drinking water side, hopefully the installation of upgrades and modernization of water systems for to deal with fire suppression needs. And I just want to note on wildfire and forest health, 2 points. One, there's $514 million for the Forest Service to support hazardous fuels management activities and what we refer to as the wildland-urban interface, which is clearly targeted towards areas like your own. And then second, there's an additional $500 million within the Department of Agriculture Natural Resources Conservation Service for watershed and flood protection activities, and that could benefit the Tahoe region also. So you see these dollars, they're huge dollars, and focus really on the sort of areas of need for the district. And then finally, there's the drought relief provisions in the law, a total of about $1.8 billion through the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation to support drought relief programs. Now, Most of that money is dedicated to water supply storage, but there is a huge amount of money in there, several $100 million for water recycling, for water conservation activities, for modernization of water infrastructure facilities, and this is over 5 years for at the Bureau of Reclamation to support primarily California-focused needs. Here's the one, shall we say, downside. We all love and would like to see more manufacturing in America. The Buy America, Build America Act, which was part of the infrastructure bill, established that all federal funding assistance programs at the federal level that go to state and local governments, as well as other procurement activities, have to be built with manufactured products in America. Now, there are some waivers. The compliance date is May 14th, 2022. If you get federal assistance for a project, this is very important, the entire project must comply with the mandate, not just the portion that gets the federal assistance. Having said that, there are provisions to allow for waivers to be extended to a project. That's the first thing. For today's conversation, I'll say that the onus for a waiver will rest on the utility to make the request of EPA for the waiver, not the manufacturer of the product. So if, for example, on part of your C line, you needed to have a new pump and you were getting funding from state SRF, or you got an earmark, or there was another program that was funded by the federal government to buy that pump, you would have to have it made in America. Unless, of course, it was not readily available, or it would increase the project's cost by 25% or more, or it was in this sort of very undefined, broad definition of being a public interest to waive the mandate. That's the project specific. The good news, though, is that EPA is looking at a couple of program-wide waivers, one of which is, that was just put on the street yesterday, is to allow for a waiver for any project under the SRF program that has had its engineering designs and specifications submitted to a state SRF by May 14th of 2022, that it would be waived into exemption from the Buy America mandate. So you wouldn't, if you couldn't find a manufactured product made in America, you wouldn't have to go through the handstands of seeking an individual waiver. The second thing we know is that EPA is looking at making certain that they have some kind of program waiver going forward that would ensure that if you have an ongoing project, that you wouldn't be subject to the mandate compliance because it would require you to redesign your ongoing project. We're waiting for that to actually be issued. At the end of the day, it's a very challenging proposition to put this mandate into place because, as you know, there isn't a lot of manufacturing in this country right now for water sector needs. A lot of this is coming out of Europe. A lot of it's coming out of China. So we are optimistic, given what EPA has said in a number of conversations we've had with them, that they're going to work to ensure that projects are not disrupted by this mandate. The other thing I would just say in closing on this Buy America mandate is that EPA has already determined, but they haven't published it yet, that repayment of SRF funds by a utility would not be considered federal resources. So going forward, if you got a loan under the SRF program or an actual grant based on the ability to provide subsidies in the form of either loan forgiveness or negative interest loans, that you would, if you got that assistance through funds that were repaid from earlier SRF loans, it would not be considered subject to the mandates of Buy America, which is encouraging just from an ease of making a project go forward. But at the end of the day, Buy America, Build America is reality. It is in law forever, and I just want to point that out. And finally, I just want to suggest to you that, well, this is a lot of money that's in the pipeline. The annual appropriation bills, they supplement all this money. So we are looking, for example, at all this money coming in, for example, the California share of the SRF, $900 million, based on the appropriations, on the annual appropriation basis for the SRF program, California could get up to another $100 million just for one fiscal year. So for FY23, for example, based on the president's budget request. So what I want to leave you with is, well, it may be slow in recognizing the money coming from the federal government to the state to actual projects. The money's there. It's already been appropriated on an emergency basis. It will go out the door. So you'll have lots of opportunities for funding assistance. And I think that will be a huge benefit to some of the issues ranging from wildfire all the way to basic modernization of your infrastructure. Okay, drought relief, very quickly. Senator Feinstein recently introduced what's called the STREAM Act, $750 million. These are authorizations. This is not actual spending right now. $750 million for storage, $300 million for water recycling, $750 million for habitat efforts to restore wetlands, watersheds, and what have you. Senator Padilla introduced at the same time what's known as the Water Efficiency, Conservation, and Sustainability Act of 22. This is a piece of legislation that is designed to promote conservation through grant assistance to utilities to support adoption of technologies by consumers, whether it's low, water efficient appliances, water efficient irrigation technology, and everything in between. It requires, on a voluntary basis, it has grant assistance to agencies to update plumbing codes that are issued by the United States and the International Water Conservation Consortium. Again, this is voluntary, but there is funding there to help agencies put together plans of action to change and update their codes. And then finally, I think this is probably one of the biggest benefits of the Padilla legislation. There is a water loss audit and response grant program, and I should have mentioned right up front, each of these programs is about $25 million in grant assistance. Not a lot of money, but enough money to sort of help get things moving forward. But anyway, this water loss audit and response program for grant assistance to agencies to go out there, identify where the losses are, if there are any losses in the water system, and then develop approaches to reduce those losses, if not eliminate them. So I think after you hear all these programs and legislation directed at California, there are a number of other bills that are out there in both the Senate and House that are focused on states outside of California, as well as in California. What does it all mean? We think, given the historic drought that continues to grip the western United States and really devastates California writ large, that we expect an omnibus water bill to be developed over the summer that will be considered by the Congress as part of its end of year, end of session, end of Congress must-do list. And because the drought and the response to the drought is a bipartisan issue of concern in both the House and the Senate, we are, I won't say guardedly optimistic, but we are optimistic that we will see some kind of legislative response come the fall, September, October, probably bleeding into the lame duck session. Finally, appropriations for the current budget year. Through the partnership, we have worked with putting together a request for $15 million to support fire suppression water infrastructure work in the Tahoe Basin. The congressional delegation has generally supported this. As I mentioned earlier, Representative McClintock does not support earmarks, but he has not voiced opposition to it, so we'll take that neutral stance as a very good position. And as I said earlier, Representative McClintock has been supportive, generally speaking, when it's time to get the money through the federal agency process. I think the one thing I want to say is Representative Amade, as it is visiting the region on July 5th, I believe the general manager is working with the partners to make certain this comes off very well. It is a testimony to the effectiveness of thinking about how to do things regionally, collaboratively. Representative Amade is a member of the Appropriations Committee, and so just by the fact that he is taking time to visit you folks, to review the issues, is a huge nod of support for the request. And though we can't say what's going to happen because the appropriations process is likely going to extend into the lame duck as it usually does, the fact is we will know in the next several weeks in the House of Representatives what the outcome was of the request for earmark assistance known as a community project assistance request for the partnership. And once the House passes it, irrespective of what the Senate does, at the end of the day, traditionally with earmarks or community project requests, each chamber has different levels of support and different levels of projects being supported. And when they get together to finalize a compromise bill, generally speaking, there's an agreement that from one chamber to the other chamber, we will accept your funding requests if you accept our funding requests. So there's sort of a gentleman's agreement that we won't contest what you guys put down as priorities in your own chamber. And then the bills get cobbled together, sent to the president, and fingers crossed, there's assistance for the partnership going forward. So, John, I'm more than happy to answer any questions. But again, I just would like to close by saying, acknowledge whatever that, you know, what you folks have done, both from the inception of getting federal assistance into the district to address the many issues that John noted during the introduction, but now how you have managed to expand the region's collaboration and collective efforts to sort of deal with the problems that, you know, face Tahoe from a climate resilient point of view, as well as just antiquated infrastructure needs, is just fantastic. And you should be very, very proud of the leadership that you guys have taken on.
Thank you, Eric, and couldn't have done it without you. So with that, I think we'll open up the board for any questions and comments.
Sure. Thank you, Eric, for the presentation. This is Shane Ramses. I was curious on going back to the PFAS slides in terms of what's moving down the pipeline. Is there any funding for technologies to help treat PFAS as part of that package, or is that basically left up to each utility's own devices to try to figure out how to mitigate the impact associated with that?
So first of all, thank you. I think the quick question is there is funding available for teeth treatment. In fact, there's $15 billion combined, and I'm trying to remember the numbers. I think it's close to $9 billion for cleanups and $6 billion for sort of activities related to cleanups and grants and what have you. There's also funding for research in the annual budget for EPA to develop technologies. So I think the quick answer is yes. If there's an interest in technologies within the district, what I would recommend is we talk about how to pursue a competitive grant opportunity. And then second of all, if earmarks were to be considered again in the coming budget cycle, not this cycle, but the coming cycle, seek an earmark for a treatment technology, because under the FY23 appropriations process that they're doing right now, there are a number of specific community project requests supporting PFAS treatment technologies.
Thank you.
Eric, this is Dave Peterson. Question for you on the Buy American requirement for the SRF money. Is there a threshold on that, or is it 100%? I guess my concern would be that if it's absolute, if it's 100%, it really targets that money to very simple projects, and it eliminates anything complex at all, like a treatment plant or, I mean, there's bound to be something in a complex structure that's going to not be American. So you could either design an incomplete project and just write those elements out of the project that might not be American, or just stick to something simple that, like a pipeline or a well, that kind of thing. So I'm asking, is this absolute, or is it like a 95% threshold, or what is it?
Yes, excellent question. So getting into the details, under the mandate, the law says the domestic content is 55% or greater, okay? The challenge is, when you hit a 55% threshold, from what we've talked to folks in sort of the manufacturing world, the 55% is effectively saying 100%. That, it's until manufacturers can retool and find ways to produce in this country, the way the law is written, that 55% threshold is really a tough threshold in many cases. I think for purposes of, is there another way to address this? There looks like there will be a de minimis exception also, which is if 5% of a project's costs don't comply, that will not ding a project. But we haven't seen the guidance on how they're going to implement the de minimis number, and we probably won't see, according to EPA staff, that kind of guidance until later this fall in September timeframe, out to October maybe. And part of it is, by the way, I do want to say one thing. This Buy America mandate applies to funds from fiscal year 22 forward. So if the state has dollars from the feds that were not appropriated, like the SRF, that are sitting in the SRF program right now, that were appropriated prior to fiscal year 22, they are not subject to Buy America mandates. But your point, Dave, is correct. If in fact it is a very stringent definition for domestic content to qualify as Buy American compliant or not, yeah, it's a difficult challenge, and it will mean, I hate to say it, but it could mean increased project costs due to just essentially trying to find the products, and then manufacturers in this world of inflation that we're in right now, the price is going up, partly because it's a simple supply and demand issue.
Right, I guess when they say Buy American, they're not talking about the continent. I mean, you've got the USMCA, they're not allowing Canadian steel to be considered American, for instance.
So there is a provision for compliance with international trade agreements like USCMA, but here's the challenge. In prior EPA on the American Iron and Steel mandate, which is basically the forerunner to this, where your iron and steel for your superstructure had to be made in America, EPA determined the only folks that could use that exception, in other words, trade agreements prevail. So if you had an agreement with Mexico, like you're talking about, you would be exempt from the American Iron and Steel provision. But what EPA said was, that's good enough, except for one thing. You have to be a party to the agreement. So the only people, there's only, I think, New York and one other state, for some reason, are parties to the agreement. But the state of California isn't, and you folks are not party to an agreement on an international trade basis. So EPA determined that it did not apply. We are working, by the way, we are working through CASA to petition EPA to address some of these issues.
Okay. Perfect.
By the way, I would say somewhat sarcastically, now's the time to build a foundry in America.
As long as you get powered on solar. All right.
Well, yeah, and no emissions also, by the way. I mean, this is unfortunately, this is where, you know, what we used to say in Policy 101, it's with policymaking, it's wicked because it comes with unintended consequences. So we wanted to clean up we wanted to have clean air, particularly in California. So over the decades and decades, you know, you cleaned up the air, which meant in part that a lot of foundries left the United States to areas where they didn't have to comply with environmental mandates. And now you just don't have the capacity on a foundry basis.
Well, that will challenge our staff to try to identify projects that we can meet that environment, and that it really limits the types of things. We do all kinds of projects, and we're just going to have to find those.
Yeah, I would say, I'm sorry, I would say, I mentioned that I'll be at CASA in August, and this is going to be one of the top issues for the Federal Legislative Committee also to talk about. And as I said, we are developing a letter to EPA. And I think, you know, there's always an opportunity down the pike when the biggest threat is that the program at large crashes and burns because nobody can use it because of the red tape. And that will force some changes too.
I believe our linear projects, we comply. When we get to pump stations and electrical, especially, that can be more challenging.
What, I mean, from a budgetary perspective, what were we looking at in line replacement over the next, say, 5 years? And that's kind of just, we see where I'm going as a thought. If that's sourced American today, and we know that we comply, and there may be a lot of people that cannot comply, plus a vast increase of monies in the pool that we could look to access, do we want to, and we know we're kind of deficient in the water line replacement over however many years going back, do we want to look at kind of front-loading water line replacement in the next 5 years, utilizing these funds specifically for that purpose? You know what I mean? That could be, and outcompete and be able to get those funds readily easily.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, we're kind of front-loading this program with water line projects more than probably we would normally to get it in line for this infrastructure fund, for these infrastructure funds. Probably we're pushing $68 million per year eventually for water line replacements.
But we've submitted nearly $30 million for this program at this point for water line.
Okay. And that would all come after, that $30 million would come after the American reform?
I think that would be
If I could jump in, did I just hear that you've already submitted up to $30 million of projects to the state?
Yes, and the state SRF.
Oh, you guys are golden, at least for that.
Yeah.
Based on what you,
Prior to May.
so pat yourself on the back. At least you got $30 million outside of the mandate.
We've always submitted applications, now we haven't submitted plans and specs.
These are just the applications.
Yeah, we haven't designed any.
But it's where that, eventually that money comes from. If it was prior to that date in May, those funds would be outside the Buy American. So I'm not sure how the funds at the state SRF are being allocated.
So I will tell you this on that question, if I heard it correctly. One of the biggest challenges is the state does not segregate its resources in a way, at least right now, in a way that can be easily determined when that money was received.
Okay. Steve, do you have something to add?
Well, from what Lynn had told me right before she retired was, we got the contract for the upper Trenton pump station and secondary thoroughfare 1 and 2 in before that deadline, so we don't have to comply with it on those projects. But we had, those were designed several years ago, the applications were put in 2 years ago. So we're operating under the assumption that anything that we have applied for will need to comply with this 5-year.
We're including that in our plans and specs. So yeah, what are you telling me?
I mean, I think this is just an unfortunate reality that everyone's going to exist in the next several years as they recalibrate supply chain situations to more nationalized systems. Right? I think that's what you're seeing. I think this funding is clearly demonstrated to incentivize that. I think that's just where this is going.
Well, that treaty exception that gives New York, state of New York, a leg up, they make it all money. That basically, whoever signed on to that is, a lot of our steel comes from Canada, and a lot of the manufacturing is done in Mexico. So they're going to be able to get around this, and we won't. So that I hope our legislators understand those details when they're agreeing to this kind of thing, because those other states are getting a tremendous leg up on us because of that one little wrinkle.
Yeah. Steve, would you agree that our linear projects we can meet by American?
Yeah, it's slowed down. We have a hard time getting parts, and so we can't often get them built at the same rate. But we're trying to correct that by getting them soon enough so that we don't have to leave time to that happen. But right now in the current climate, it's just been really difficult to get.
Sometimes 6 months out for pretty simple parts.
Yeah. Things like bolts are pretty critical.
Yeah.
In regard to kind of joining the treaty agreement, the state of New York, excuse me, would it be if the state of California had joined, would that have been acceptable, or would the district have joined as well? Meaning, does everybody within the state of New York get to enjoy the benefit of obtaining steel from Canada, or would each sub-district within the state have to do the same thing? Because the way,
Yep. Yeah, I think the quick answer is that it would only apply to the party to the agreement, so it would just be the state of New York, for example.
Oh.
Even better.
So they can give away money without actually giving away money, right?
There you go. There you go.
Yeah.
that's what
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you.
Sounds like linear projects, get them in early and get them bid early so we get the parts on time and put them in.
Yeah, they're, it may shift the sewer, because, if you go to clay pipe, concrete pipe, that's manufactured here. Whether the reinforcing steel and concrete pipe is manufactured domestically, I guess that would maybe come up on that 55% threshold, but usually those dirt-based materials are made here.
Yeah, well, PVC has been my experience. It's been positive.
How much longer is the lead time in terms of non-switch units?
Let's see, if you want. I'll speak next about the Colorado project. Their number of suppliers aren't even quoting their United Steel products for next time. So the lead time is so long, they don't know if the availability or the pricing. So I'll stick to it, but that's why we do this project now. There's just element of supply chain issues when it comes to drastic. So we're seeing 6 to 10 months, I would say, typically for the AIS projects.
And that's just for the American products. So if we were just using the general fund, we could, okay.
We could build things a lot faster.
Probably 2 or 3 months is the normal lead time.
Somebody else? Okay. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity. I can't wait to see everybody in person. I'll see you in August.
See you soon.
Okay, Trevor.
Lean on Brian. The other gentleman's experience. Thank you. Well, I'm Trevor Coolidge, Senior Engineering Group, here to discuss the award of the Keller Heavenly Water System Improvement Project, Phase 3. This also includes about 400 feet of water line on D Circle. We had a big blowout and a portion of the road destroyed out there last summer, so we're repairing that to the county. There's also a bid alternate to construct an access road to the Cat Tank, so I'll speak a little bit about that. I don't know if it's good or bad following that presentation about pricing, because our engineer's estimate was a low bidder for this project. And it's been interesting talking to the contractor about where the costs are and in terms of what we're seeing with those costs. Talking about volts, just to get into the weeds, 30,000 volts in this Keller booster station, $700 per flange. So just a massive cost in these American iron steel products. And the good thing is we're getting at a very competitive rate. We're probably actually coming out ahead when you look at our interest rate versus inflation right now. So the cost of money is cheap. But in looking at the bids we're looking at, for the base bid, White Rock Construction bid $3.9 million. Engineer's estimate was $3.4 million, so about a $500,000 difference on $3.5 million. If you look just at the booster station components, engineer's estimate was $515,000 for that. So we've got $900K in proposed improvements there. Engineer's estimate was less than half of that. Just the parts alone for some of those items exceeded the engineer's estimate. So we're just seeing the costs are that high, even giving suppliers almost a year lead time with constructing next year. So while the project is high with respect to the engineer's estimate, we're really feeling like that is the bidding climate that we're in right now. We're seeing scarcity, we're seeing costs going up. We were almost happy to get 2 bidders on this project. Hayne Company left $300,000 or $400,000 in, it was $3,000 or $4,000 higher, which is one of our normal competitive bidders. We usually get water lines and things like that. We reached out, found out why we didn't have more bidders. Vince Aguilera sounds like they're out there bonding capacity. They're very busy with us right now, particularly one of our low bidders to look at water lines and plant projects. Other contractors like SNC, they weren't even at our pre-bid. We did have a half dozen contractors pre-bid, which is a pretty good showing for pre-bid for us. But people are busy out there and they're definitely cherry picking their work. This is a very complex project. You have water line elements, you have road construction, you have pump station, there's electrical work within that pump station. So there's a lot of components in this. There's a fair bit of paving. There's a lot of money in that oil, that asphalt. So just talking through what we're seeing, especially dovetailing with the prior conversation. Then I also want to touch on the bid alternate. So it's something you can consider whether we award or not. This is specific to the Lookout Tank parcel for the district owns. So we own a parcel at the top of the Lookout point, or Lookout route, which is just to the window here, out in the Anywhere Burn area. We had pretty significant damage to that site. It burned all around it during the Angora fire. We spent a fair bit of money restoring the site, including an access road that crosses 5 publicly and privately owned parcels, and actually accesses through a private driveway. During the Callaway fire, that whole section that had been stabilized was bulldozed again with the fire line around it. So we continue to have erosion control issues out there with that access. We also continue to have property owner conflicts with our use of that access. And we're seeing those parcels potentially converting to CTC with Forest Service ownership in the future. So what this proposes to do is install a paver access road on our parcel that would address the erosion control issues, address our staff's access issues, and provide a long-term solution for that site. And so that is approximately a $540,000 bid alternate that we included in this project. If you looked at the projects we were bidding over the winter following the Calvert fire, identified as this one having a very similar access road reconstruction for the Keller Tank site. I was pleased to see that the contractors bid the exact same price per square foot for this proposed road and the bid alternate as they did in the base bid. So we're not seeing us getting gouged as this is a bid alternate. Exactly the same to the penny cost per foot for this proposed road. So due to the fact that we've seen this water tank become an issue for access and erosion issues, calls from neighbors and whatnot, we were proposing that we move forward with this proposed road. We would issue a stop notice to finalize permitting with TRPA, and we'd also try to engage in value engineering discussions with White Rock Construction. White Rock, ironically, 12, 15 years ago, was the restoration contractor that did work on that site under an emergency contract. So they're getting another bite of the apple, but they are very familiar with the site, and we're hoping we might be able to bring down that added cost a little bit. Any questions about either the base bid, what the project includes, or that bid alternate?
Just a question on the bid alternate. White Rock had for cellular reinforced concrete system, they were quite a bit higher than Hain, and quite a bit higher than that engineer's estimate. And I'm just wondering, you know, what are they seeing there, and are they expecting an increase in quantity in the actual, or what's going on there?
We think we're pretty tight on our quantity. We've got a planning profile for this. We've got cross sections. We know the width, so we don't think there's creep in that quantity. I can say right now, I know my neighbors came, I think $27 a square foot, 3,000 pavers, so a lot less on the private side, but still expensive. What I noticed was they were competitive, I believe it was with the excavation. They were a third of the price of Hain, and then they were also low on the, I think some of the riprap, but it's primarily in the excavation and the mobilization. They're extremely low. Not extremely low, they're lower, but you can see they put more money into that road work than into the general excavation. So I was alarmed to see the 700 square foot. I previously worked in Oregon, and 12 years ago, I could do on a prevailing wage job pavers for $10 a square foot with a nice pervious base, full section of 10 inches deep. So I was pretty alarmed to see that. But when I looked at it, I saw kind of where Hain put money, where White Rock put money. If you look in the base bid, it's the same price per square foot with White Rock, much higher than Hain. But if you look at Hain is looking at $500 per linear foot for the water line in that road. So you can see Hain put their money into the water line, not into the reinforced block. So I don't like the pricing, but I can see where the money went. And yeah, as you know, that was it's $177,000 over the engineer's estimate for looking at those bid schedules.
Is there any opportunity for cost recovery from FEMA or Cal OES with respect to the damage created by the bulldozer activity for the fuel break?
So we worked with Lynn. This was one of the projects that we submitted to Cal OES and FEMA for reimbursement. They did, and it was rejected. So we tried that. I think we'll continue to try it in the next year, see if we can find a different angle. If we were able to find something the next year, we might even just cancel this out of this contract and we did it. So we'll continue to pursue that, but our initial application and attempt was rejected. It was primarily because there was an existing access right there on our parcel.
Where, I mean, it seems to me the way I read this, it's like you got a couple sites up near your place up there, and North Upper Truckee and Keller is sort of like having the base, correct?
Yes, Keller is the bulk of this project. And we have, we're hoping to get the new circle work done late this season. And that's one place where we're looking to also recover some costs, because we're going to use our operating funds. We can go to non-American, which means we can get it sooner and potentially it'll be less expensive. And then, use package because it's in the area, but that'll be next year. The bulk of the work is next year, and view and eventually pop over the primary activities this summer.
I guess for us, do you want us to chime in on the road part?
If you'd like, I've got a recommendation to include it, but, yeah, welcome your input.
It's just fun that the road costs over $500,000, road to a finish. So, I guess
Better last.
we're overlooking it, right?
It is, I don't know if, Chris, are you still here? I thought Chris would have run out by now. Do you want to speak at all?
I've dealt a lot with the customers. The road used to take off the driveway, and we had to go onto his driveway and then cut up. Goes up, and then on top there was like a catch basin for all the sediment coming down. And then there was a couple houses there on the left, and the road was behind them. And on a good winter, we would get a lot of sediment coming down, especially after the burn. There was nothing to hold it. And we've spent a lot of time, I shouldn't say a lot. Depending on the winters, we will spend time out there digging out holes. I've gone down and helped do some work around their houses where sediment's coming down. All in all, it'd be worth the money to be able to get away from all of that. And you're right, $500,000 for a road going up, yeah. But the way it's going to go up and the way they're going to build it, hopefully we'll get rid of a lot of that sediment coming down compared to what we're dealing with now. Now that it's bulldozed, if we get a lot of wet weather next winter, God knows what's going to come off of that hill. I mean, at least, we have the brush up there now after a couple of years to hold some of it. But it does get to the point where we're spending some time up there when we could be doing a lot of other things. And unfortunately, this time, with the economy the way it is, everything's, the prices increased. It is kind of unfortunate, but I think in the long run, it will benefit us.
Thanks, Chris.
Is there any way to tag this on the EIP in some way from an erosion control perspective, basically as mitigating the impact associated with the road? If we get somehow, get some credit, some brownie points?
I would like to say yes, but I think that would be a long ways out, just because if they hear constructing a new road, it usually doesn't score that many points. I mean, I could probably sugarcoat it, but it's,
It's not an erosion issue. So.
Yeah. I mean, it is an access and erosion issue. This is also providing municipal space, and there's a lot of benefits to this. It's one of our critical tanks in the area that's already burned. There's a lot of benefit. I mean, I think we can look at that in terms of Lake Tahoe Restoration Act and things like that, but it's been hard to find avenues for getting funding for this project.
Yeah, it does seem access, a lot of historical problems exacerbated by the fire. Something we can look into, at least as.
Maybe not even to suggest that there's LTRA money for it, but maybe just to say, hey, look, we're doing this, doing our part, just a contribution to the overall environmental improvement program.
I'm picturing that going through tier B permitting, I'm going to have to say we're going to abandon 1,500 feet of road and we're going to put in 500 feet that's now stable, and that will be kind of that trade-off and that balance. So hopefully it'll be less work for us in the long run, but it is a major expenditure.
If they include that, the cost of this project could be included in the local match.
Yeah.
LTRA.
Yeah. Okay.
Want to read the proposed action?
Is the board okay if I include the bid alternate and recommended action? Okay.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, recommend that the board waive minor irregularities in the bid from White Rock Construction Incorporated find that White Rock is the lowest responsible and responsive bidder and awarded the contract for the Keller Heavenly Water System Improvements Project Phase 3, including bid alternate number 1 to White Rock in the amount of $4,457,288.25.
Move to approve.
Second.
Do we have a motion and a second? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Trevor.
I don't know if you folks know, but the screens are always blank, so it's always pretty suspenseful.
Okay.
That's why I'm looking longingly.
Never know, right?
Yeah.
You get a no vote someday.
I was just gonna say congratulations again to the addition of your family.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, very exciting stuff.
Sure.
It's your family is going to.
Yeah. Paul?
Yes. So we're seeking approval of a resolution which will modify the payment of claim process today. We've been talking to you for a while about modifying the payment of claims approval process to provide additional flexibility, help improve the timeliness of some of our payments, and to potentially be able to reduce the number of board meetings, since right now all of the claims have to be approved at the board level at all of the regular scheduled board meetings. So the attached resolution, which is 3226-22, it designates the board president, the board vice president, the general manager, and the chief financial officer as approvers for the payments, which is allowable under Government Code Section 53910, which Gary talked about a couple of times. Specifically, though, the resolution requires the claims be approved by either the board president or vice president, and either Sean or myself. So at least one board member and one district officer must approve. All four could approve, but at a minimum, one each has to. What we plan to do is submit the claims weekly for approval by email to all four positions. And then we'll include a list of the approved claims on the following board agenda, just as a consent item to receive and file that list. So if you approve this resolution today, we anticipate that the next board meeting, which is July 7th, will actually be the last agenda that you will see the payment of claims as an action item. So I'll be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
I think this mimics what we talked about when we workshopped this issue, so looks good to me.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay, then. So the requested board action is to approve Resolution 3226-22, adopting procedures for the payment of claims.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. And that motion passes unanimously. That brings us to payment of claims. I'm going to move approval of payment of claims in the amount of $859,023.43.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. And that motion passes unanimously.
You've done almost every one of those since you were board with me. You only have one more.
One more. This one was.
It was kind of like yours, right? I was like, good for you.
Those, all those columns and columns didn't bother me.
You're the banker in
Do we have any standing and ad hoc or liaison report?
The ops committee was supposed to go until next month. So it's supposed to be.
Okay. How about board member reports? God bless you.
I was gonna say, following, state action about water, conservation efforts with the drought, I was contacted by some city staff members asking questions about what that meant for them. I know they've been in discussion with SDQD staff since that point, but in fairness of the comments I've made towards the Keys in many years, I would suggest that, in our discussions with the city as well, that, as we're talking about kind of this year's water restrictions and how that may or may not impact them, also reference, the resources that are available to get them to move out of turf. So it doesn't become a systemic problem that some years they water, some years they don't. And look to address the problem early on. And then was on a call earlier today. The city's actively working with Liberty Utilities on an operational agreement between the city and Liberty. One of the items for discussion is the tariff structure that we will be operating under. And this was the tariff structure currently in place is what limited our solar installs to 1 megawatt. They being the city and support groups, want to raise that to 5 megawatts through an existing tariff system that is in California. And so wanted to raise that to the attention of staff and see if there'd be an opportunity to support them in any of their avenues, just as a discussion point when you're with Joe or some other city staff member. And then kind of final point today, sorry so many, was the city, Sarah Lennon and Sustainability Corp, the city had put together a biomass economy group, very well attended by a lot of local folks, all agencies you'd expect to be there. And so it's a really kind of positive development, the city taking the lead on that and getting the coordination pieces together. So just wanted to kind of update you on those items.
Then Shane and I took a tour of DVR down on 6-3 last couple Fridays ago, and met with the rancher that leases the ground. Trevor was there to show us around. We got to stand ankle deep in water for a little while. And take a look at things, look at grass. And
Gotta get John's boots.
Yeah, we learned a lot about just how he manages the grass and manages the portion of the property that he's responsible for. So that was very educational on that part.
I think that was great. It was good to be on the ground and see different parts and pieces of different pasture lands and things like that. And there might be some opportunities for, restoration and some other things. But we did talk about having a follow-up conversation in our next ops meeting, which we'll cover in probably July, just talk through what's coming next. But he is looking for a 5-year lease. So we just want to kind of talk to it and share observations and find the best path forward. Somebody's doing a good job.
Colorado Water Agency Purveyor report.
We met on the 8th, and regular board meeting adopted the budget in that. We had some discussion about the amount of money that's directed toward the Tahoe Basin and kind of put them on notice that we're starting to get a little bothered. And so they did commit to somewhat of a pivot to the Tahoe Basin for this year. In the COVID money, the portion that went to the Tahoe Basin went to North Tahoe, all of it, every penny, we didn't get any. And I pointed that out to them, and that we're a little bothered by that. So it was a little uncomfortable, but I think they needed to be uncomfortable.
What was the response?
That they were going to redouble their efforts this year, and some of them don't. They maybe just forgot about us. I did have to remind them that I want to appoint executive director, general manager, whatever campaign. Said something to the effect of, a lot of their affection has gone to communities that can't afford things, and I had to remind them that we're a disadvantaged community up here. And that was a surprise, I think, to the board members, and I'm not sure if it was a surprise to the staff, but I guess we have to speak up from time to time.
Get the message back out.
Please, we'll work.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you for making them uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Continue to do that, please.
Do we have any staff or attorney reports?
I just want to remind everybody, I sent out an email to board members that the filing period is starting July 18th for our board seats in November. There are 3 seats up, so it goes from July 18th to August 12th. If we do not have an incumbent file for their seat to rerun, the period will be extended to August 17th, but only for non-incumbents. So if you forget to file by August 12th, you don't get a second chance. So definitely get that done. Make an appointment with El Dorado County. You can't do it through me. I've had board members ask in the past, can you file it for me? They don't want me to do that, so you have to do that on your own. And if you have any questions, let me know. We've got Director Supplement's seat, Director Lantos, and Director Excellence seat.
Maybe all of them. All new people.
So there is, the office here is available in town here as opposed to driving in Placerville?
Yes, you definitely want to call because they have limited hours.
Okay.
I know when I've gone to do my notary stuff, they're like there from Tuesday from 1 to 3 and Thursday from 10 to 2 or something like that. So not very much.
And the last time we did it by Zoom, right?
I had to go to Placerville.
Yeah.
I think I did it by Zoom.
Did you?
Yeah.
I did it up here when I did it. I didn't go down there.
I did it up here too.
I went down there.
Yeah, their hours just change. They fluctuate, so the whole call.
I think last time I made an appointment,
Yeah.
like a week or so out, came in, yeah.
Okay. Something to think about. General manager report.
All right, thanks, Kelly. I'll start out with a staffing report. Underground repair water supervisor. Interviews were yesterday, and we selected Frank Amidandolo, who has been acting supervisor and really doing a great job for underground repair. So congratulations to Frank. So we have an opening in water. We will likely have an in-house posting coming soon for this now vacant position, Frank's former position, water service representative. Customer service representative, this posting closed on Sunday. We're looking at 25 applications, and interviews are tentatively scheduled for June 29th. Underground repair sewer, we have 2 openings in this department. This posting is open until July 5th. Then finally, with Ryan's departure to customer service, engineering has opened a cross-training opportunity for the asset management analyst position, and I expect we'll be recruiting for this in the fall most likely. Next, Lake Valley Fire. Perhaps you've heard Chief Brad Zlendick has retired, and Chad Stevens is the interim fire chief. I met with Brad and Chad last month. I also sent in a letter of appreciation to Brad for all of his great work for the district and for our community over the years. That I appreciated working with Brad and found it to be very valuable and productive, including the ISO insurance assessments and ratings process, the hydrant flows and fire suppression readiness, emergency operations, especially his, I would say, dynamic efforts to highlight the importance of our systems during the call door, with our water systems and also Luther Pass, and get those systems protected. And now a potential multi-agency fire station project on Black Bart. So we'll miss Brad. Thanks for all his work. And the fire hydrant assessment program. This, you might remember this kicked off last July or August, around that. And I just wanted to update the board on the progress of this program. Our first ever system-wide assessment of all 1,860 hydrants in our system. The assessment is now complete, 100%. During this process, we found 14 hydrants to be non-working, which were immediately replaced. We also found 15 hydrants to be leaking or with major deficiencies, and so these are set for replacement later this year. And we also found 412 other hydrants that were in need of rehabilitation or maintenance, and we expect to complete that over the next year, depending on priority. So thanks to Underground Repair Water for getting this done, and also engineering and our asset management program. We're focusing this effort. This is really a major goal achieved for our asset management program.
You just give kudos to Ryan's team. That was, on the efficiency committee, that was always a really bright spot to see that unfold. And, in particular, both the review and the repair of the hydrants, but also the efficiency that was able to be created for staff and how you interacted with the repair of those hydrants was really impressive and a great job.
Yeah, we had this GIS-based online dashboard, so it showed all the hydrants and whether they had been inspected or not, and what the status of the inspection was. So if we have a crew out in the field, like off North Upper Trucking, and finish another job at like 2 a.m. or 2 p.m., they could look at that map and check some hydrants and fill the rest of their day with really productive activity. So, and Ryan was instrumental in setting that up as well. So, yeah, great job. So Aqua was here last Thursday. Executive Director Dave Egerton, along with Jennifer Rhodes, our regional representative. From the district, Dave was here as our Aqua liaison, and Paul and Shelley and Julie and Yesenia were here as well. We talked about our district systems, we talked about our system needs, about the fire, about drought, water supply, water quality, some of our new asset management technologies that he's very interested in and wanted to highlight with other agencies in Aqua. And I think just overall opportunities to partner and align with Aqua across a range of legislative and regulatory affairs.
I wanted to add that Dave Egerton he wants to kind of showcase SDPUD at a future Aqua meeting. Just to tell our story of our sustainability and 100% recycling of biosolids and water, just the environmental stewardship that the district has been doing all along. He thinks that story isn't really out there, so we need to tell it.
And he was yelled at our new technologies, the satellite leak detection systems, some of those examples he's wanting to highlight with other agencies as well. So we'll do that. Next, July 4th parade. Just want to mention that the city of South Lake Tahoe is hosting a parade starting at 9 a.m. from Cedar Run to BG Park. The district will be participating. We've got a few vehicles in the lineup, and if any of the board members or the family members want to join us, just let me know.
Is Shelley making a float?
We have a float. Yeah, it gets decorated. Yeah. There's a toilet on there. I'm not sure what's on.
My neighbor, right after we heard that, saw the email, our neighbor had enter a couple floats as part of our Firewise designation. So that was instead of having a community parade, the kids usually get on bikes and decorate stuff. That'd be cool. You can make Shelby wear a dress like Katniss Everdeen, go on fire. I mean, something to think of for next year.
Last time was Amity visit, and we mentioned this a little bit with Eric on that call. But Mark Amity, U.S. Congressman from Nevada, will be coming to the district on July 5th from 10 to 11:30. The purpose is to thank him for his support for funding water infrastructure for fire suppression. His support directly resulted in that $7 million set aside as part of the Lake Tahoe Restoration Act this year for water infrastructure projects. We're now working with the Forest Service and TRPA on the distribution of those funds. So our plan is to have a short presentation, talk about future infrastructure needs, showing some of the fire area locally, Arrowhead Tank and Moving Pass, and emphasize the importance again of our water system in fighting the polar fire. And again, this was set up really by ENS, so thanks again to Eric and David for that. We plan to host the congressman and his staff along with representatives from Tahoe City and North Tahoe PD, TIFGID, the Forest Service, TRPA, League State Lake Tahoe, Lake Valley, Tahoe Fire and Fuels Team, and a couple other area fire chiefs. And I just wanted to, if any of the board members are interested in attending, let me know. If there's any interest, or certainly if more than two are coming, we'll need to post this as a possible forum. So if there's any interest, please let me know and we can get that notice out if needed.
When is he coming?
July 5th, 10 a.m. to 11:30. So
You guys gonna be here? You guys doing a little roadshow? Or?
we're gonna start from here, have a little presentation in the boardroom, and then we've got a couple bands coming in from Tahoe City, and we'll do that quick tour and pack as much as we can in 90 minutes.
And our California representative will be here.
And that's all I have today. Thank you.
Okay, well, you see the past and future meetings, and I think this meeting is adjourned.